My mom bribed me to hide her affair, stole our college funds, and made my teen brother deal substances. When I helped him escape, they forged documents and committed arson, but their own surveillance footage became evidence that buried them. Ever since the day me and my brother enrolled into middle school, my parents made it very clear to us that we were their retirement plan. Their actual words to us were, "Your investments, not children." And the worst part was, they meant it. They put Ring cameras in our bedrooms and tracked us with Life 360 to make sure we were studying. And they made us submit these productivity reports every night where we had to account for every single hour. Can you imagine having to justify taking a 20-minute shower to your parents who timed bathroom breaks? They even charged us rent from our part-time jobs because it was supposedly practice for when we'd be supporting them. The real kicker though, they drained our college funds for their failed business ventures, but still somehow expected us to get into Ivy League schools. Things got really dark when I went to pick up my mom from her pharma sales job because her car was supposedly broken down. I caught her making out with this rich country club guy in his Mercedes. When she saw me, she jumped in my car and literally handed me a bottle of Adderall. She then said it was for my focus and my silence. I stared at those pills every night knowing I was already falling apart from working 3 jobs while maintaining a 4.2 GPA. But what choice did I have? My 15-year-old brother started dealing Adderall to other students, and instead of being horrified, our parents praised his entrepreneurial spirit and bought him an iPhone 15 when he made his first 1,000. Meanwhile, I was slowly dying inside, taking half doses of stimulants, trying to function on 2 hours of sleep. The only adult who noticed I was drowning was Ms. Chen, my English teacher who found me drooling on my creative writing assignment. Instead of getting mad, she let me nap on her classroom couch. When I won this national writing contest worth $5,000, I was so excited, until my parents literally stole the money saying I was finally contributing to the family. I lost it and threatened to tell my dad about the affair, but my mom retaliated by destroying all my theater costumes the night before opening night. Mrs. Chen stayed up with me until 3 a.m., helping me remake everything. She said something that broke me. Parents shouldn't treat their children like investments. Everything exploded when my brother OD'd on his own pills trying to stay awake for 3 days straight to study. The cops found his stash in his bag at the hospital, and suddenly we needed lawyers for possession charges. My parents called this family meeting in the hospital while my brother was still hooked up to IVs, and they literally calculated how much he'd need to sell to cover the $50,000 in medical and legal bills. My mom actually said maybe they should have invested more in me since at least I hadn't needed lawyers yet. During this insane meeting, my dad's phone got a credit card alert from the hotel my mom had been at, and I watched him figure out the affair. But instead of snapping, he just kept talking about profit margins with this terrifying rage underneath. Ms. Chen became my lifeline, helping me secretly apply to conservatory programs, while I faked pre-law applications for my parents. She even opened a bank account for me to hide money in. My parents were so busy avoiding each other after the affair discovery that they barely noticed when I started moving out. I got a full ride to a performing arts school, but told them it was entertainment law, and created this elaborate schedule to keep them separated at home so I could pack without them noticing. Before I left, I hid a spare key to my apartment in my brother's room, with a note saying, "If you ever need to escape." For 18 months, I dodged their calls and built a new life, until they saw me in a touring production ad. They ransacked my brother's room during a drug search and found my hidden key and address. While I was at rehearsal, they broke into my apartment and stole literally everything, including sentimental stuff like letters from Miss Chen and my first paycheck stub. They left a note saying, "Payment 1 of what you owe us." My brother called sobbing because he thought he hid the key so well and felt responsible. I was filing a police report when he called again saying they were sending him to military school tomorrow because he enabled my betrayal by hiding that key. His voice was shaking when he said he knew I was done with them, but he couldn't do this alone. So now I'm sitting here realizing I can't cut them off yet because I have to save my brother first. I drove through the night with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The highway stretched endlessly ahead while I kept checking my phone for updates from my brother. He'd gone silent after that last call, and the silence terrified me more than anything. When I finally pulled up to my parents' house at dawn, every light was on. My dad's BMW sat crooked in the driveway like he'd parked in a hurry. Through the living room window, I could see my brother sitting on the couch with a duffel bag at his feet, while my parents paced around him. I didn't knock. Using my old key, I walked straight in to find my mother mid-sentence about responsibility and consequences. She froze when she saw me, her pharma sales blazer wrinkled from what looked like an all-night argument session. "Get out of my house," she said, but her voice wavered. My dad just stared at me with that same controlled rage from the hospital, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he couldn't spit out. My brother jumped up from the couch, and I saw the bruise on his cheek, fresh, purple spreading to yellow at the edges. He grabbed his duffel bag and started toward me, but my dad stepped between us. "He's a minor. You take him, and I call the cops for kidnapping." I pulled out my phone and showed him the recording I'd started the moment I walked in. "Go ahead, explain the bruise while you're at it." My mother's face went pale. She knew exactly what kind of questions that would raise, especially with my brother's recent possession charges. The military school threat had been their nuclear option, but they hadn't counted on me actually showing up. "Fine," my dad said through gritted teeth. "Take him, but you're both dead to us. No inheritance, no family, nothing." My brother pushed past him and practically ran to me. As we turned to leave, my mother called out, "You'll be back. You can't handle raising a teenager. You'll fail just like you failed us as an investment." We left without another word. In my car, my brother finally broke down, sobbing so hard his whole body shook. I drove us to a cheap motel an hour away and paid cash, paranoid they might track my credit cards. Over gas station coffee and vending machine breakfast, my brother told me everything. How they'd been forcing him to sell his Adderall prescription to other kids, keeping detailed records of every transaction. How they'd hit him when he tried to refuse after his OD. How they'd already enrolled him in military school and planned to forge my signature on custody papers. I called Ms. Chen from the motel parking lot. She answered on the second ring, even though it was barely 7 a.m. "I have him," I said, and heard her exhale in relief. "Bring him here," she said immediately. "Both of you. We'll figure this out." We drove to Ms. Chen's modest townhouse where she had already set up her guest room for my brother. While he showered and changed, she sat me down at her kitchen table with more coffee and a legal pad. "Your parents will escalate," she said matter-of-factly. "They've lost control and they'll lash out. We need to document everything and get ahead of whatever they're planning." She was right. By noon, my phone was blowing up with calls from extended family saying my parents had told them I'd kidnapped my brother and stolen money from their business. My mother had posted on Facebook about her troubled daughter who needed prayers and intervention. Ms. Chen helped us find a family lawyer named Gregory Murphy who specialized in custody cases involving abuse. He took one look at my brother's bruise, the documentation of forced substance dealing, and the recording I'd made, and immediately filed for emergency custody. "Your parents made a mistake putting those Ring cameras in your bedrooms," he said. "That footage is evidence now. Every time they forced him to count substance money, every threat they made, it's all recorded." The legal process moved faster than I expected. Within a week, we had a temporary custody order and a court date. My parents hired their own lawyer and tried to paint me as an unstable actress who couldn't provide proper care, but Gregory had prepared us well. What we didn't expect was what the investigation uncovered. When the court subpoenaed my parents' financial records, they found years of tax fraud. My parents had been claiming both of us as dependents while simultaneously reporting business losses from ventures that never existed. Worse, my mother's pharmaceutical connections revealed an entire illegal prescription network she'd been running. My brother's testimony became crucial. He had names, dates, and amounts. He knew which kids bought what and when. He even had screenshots of text conversations where my mother explicitly told him which pills to push to which students. The FBI got involved when they realized the scope of the prescription substance ring. Suddenly, my parents weren't just facing custody battles. They were looking at federal charges for substance distribution and tax evasion. I'll never forget sitting in Gregory's office when he got the call that my parents had been arrested. My brother was doing homework at the conference table, finally able to focus without pills, and he looked up at me with this expression of pure relief. "It's over," I told him. "They can't hurt us anymore." But it wasn't quite over. The next months were brutal. I worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat: morning shifts at a coffee shop, afternoon tutoring, and evening performances when I could book them. My brother started therapy and slowly weaned off the Adderall addiction my parents had created. Ms. Chen became our rock. She helped my brother transfer schools to get away from his former customers. She brought groceries when I was too exhausted to shop. She sat with us during the criminal trial when we had to testify against our parents. Watching them in orange jumpsuits was surreal. My mother cried and played victim, claiming she'd only been trying to provide for her family. My dad maintained his cold fury until the very end, staring at us like we were failed investments he needed to write off. They each got 8 years. The judge called their treatment of us unconscionable exploitation of parental authority. The substance charges alone would have been significant, but combined with tax fraud and child abuse, they faced the maximum sentences. After the sentencing, my brother and I sat in my hit-up Honda in the courthouse parking lot. He was 17 by then, taller than me, and finally looking healthy. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for everything. The substances, getting you involved." "Stop," I cut him off. "We survived. That's what matters." We drove home to our tiny apartment, nothing like the McMansion we'd grown up in, but it was ours. The walls were covered with his artwork and my show posters. Ms. Chen had helped us frame the letter from the judge granting me permanent custody, and we'd hung it in the kitchen like other families hang diplomas. My brother graduated high school with honors, completely clean. I was there in the audience with Ms. Chen, both of us crying as he walked across the stage. He'd already been accepted to art school with a partial scholarship, and I'd been promoted to assistant director at the theater company. The night of his graduation, we had a small party at our apartment. Ms. Chen brought cake, Gregory stopped by with congratulations, and a few of my brother's real friends, not customers, came to celebrate. As I watched my brother laugh with his friends, truly happy for the first time in years, I thought about my mother's prediction that I'd fail. She'd been wrong about so many things, but especially about what family meant. Family wasn't an investment portfolio or a retirement plan. It wasn't about returns or profit margins. It was about showing up when someone needed you, even when it cost everything. It was Ms. Chen staying up all night to help remake costumes. It was Gregory taking our case pro bono when he learned we couldn't afford his fees. It was my brother and me rebuilding our lives from scratch. My parents had treated us like assets, but we'd learned to treat each other like human beings, and that made all the difference. The celebration felt hollow when I noticed the unmarked car parked across from our apartment building. My brother was still laughing with his friends, but something about that sedan made my skin crawl. 2 days later, we got served with papers claiming we owed my parents $300,000 for childhood expenses and educational investments. Gregory Murphy called me immediately after reviewing the documents. His voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before. "They're claiming you signed a contract at 18 agreeing to repay them for raising you. The signature looks authentic." My hands shook as I remembered that stack of papers my mother had me sign for college financial aid the week before I left for conservatory. She'd rushed me through them, saying we'd missed the deadline. I'd trusted her. The lawsuit demanded immediate payment, or they'd garnish my wages and put liens on any future earnings. My brother found me crying over the papers at our kitchen table. He sat down across from me, his face pale. "There's something else," he said quietly. "Mom called my old dealer friend Marcus. She offered him $5,000 to plant substances in your car." The room spun. Even from behind bars, they were trying to destroy us. Gregory filed motions to block a lawsuit, but warned us the forged contract looked legitimate enough to cause serious problems. Meanwhile, I started checking my car obsessively, terrified of what might appear. Ms. Chen showed up at our door with boxes of documents. "I've been keeping records," she said, spreading papers across our coffee table. "Every time your parents made you work instead of studying, every school event they made you miss for their business ventures, every report card conference where they demanded I inflate your grades." She'd documented everything with the thoroughness of someone who'd seen too many kids slip through cracks. There were emails from my parents demanding she change my grades, threatening to get her fired if she didn't comply. Photos of me asleep in her classroom after working until dawn. Even a recording of my mother screaming at her for enabling laziness when she'd let me eat lunch in her room instead of working. Gregory's eyes lit up as he reviewed everything. "This changes things. We can prove systematic educational neglect and exploitation." But my parents had connections. The next week, Ms. Chen got called into the principal's office. Someone had reported her for inappropriate relationships with students. The accusation was baseless, but the investigation meant she couldn't help us directly anymore. She texted me from the parking lot, tears in her voice. "Don't let them win." My brother started having panic attacks. The stress of potentially losing our stability triggered all his old anxieties. I'd find him awake at 3 a.m., checking window locks and door bolts, convinced our parents had found a way out of prison. His therapist increased his sessions, but the bills were adding up fast. Then Marcus actually showed up at my work. He lingered by the coffee shop counter, ordering drink after drink, watching me with calculating eyes. When I took my break, he followed me to the alley. "Your mom says hi," he said, lighting a cigarette. cigarette, says you're being ungrateful, says maybe you need a reminder of how easy it is to lose everything. I recorded the whole conversation on my phone, my hand steady despite my racing heart. When he mentioned the $5,000 offer, I asked him why he was telling me instead of taking it. Because your brother saved my life once, he said. Talked me out of some dark stuff when we were dealing together, but your mom doesn't know that. She thinks I'm still the same desperate kid who'd do anything for money. We formed an unlikely alliance. Marcus agreed to record his conversations with my mother, pretending to go along with her plan while feeding her false information. Through him, we learned she was coordinating everything from prison through a contraband phone, using her pharmaceutical contacts to move money and messages. The financial pressure mounted. Legal fees, therapy bills, and basic living expenses drained every penny I earned. I picked up a fourth job doing overnight inventory at a warehouse, surviving on 3 hours of sleep. My brother noticed me swaying on my feet one morning and begged me to slow down. We'll figure it out, he said, but I could see him calculating how much his therapy cost, how much his food added to our bills. That night, I caught him looking up jobs. Even though Gregory had warned us his working could jeopardize our custody case, everything accelerated when my father got early release for good behavior. Gregory called me at work, his voice urgent. He's out. Filed for emergency custody claiming you're an unfit guardian. We have 48 hours to respond. I left work immediately, my manager threatening to fire me if I didn't return. My brother was at school, and I couldn't reach him. His phone went straight to voicemail. Panic set in as I drove to his school, only to find he'd been checked out early by a family member. School security footage showed my father, cleaned up in a suit, presenting documents that looked official. My brother had gone willingly, probably thinking it was related to the custody case. By the time I reached Gregory's office, 3 hours had passed. He can't take him out of state, Gregory assured me, already filing emergency motions. We'll get him back. But my father wasn't trying to leave. He'd taken my brother to their old house, now in foreclosure, but still technically theirs. When police performed the welfare check Gregory requested, they found my brother sitting in his old room, surrounded by boxes of evidence my father had prepared, photos of our tiny apartment, receipts showing our financial struggles, medical records highlighting my brother's therapy needs. My father had built a case that I couldn't provide adequate care, using our poverty as proof of neglect. My brother called me that night from the police station, where they'd taken him after the welfare check. He kept saying you were ruining my future, that you were too young and selfish to raise me properly. He had all these college brochures saying he'd already paid deposits. The custody hearing got expedited. My father showed up with an expensive lawyer, claiming his prison time had been a wake-up call, and he'd reformed. He presented bank statements showing mysterious deposits, testimony from character witnesses I'd never heard of, and a psychologist's evaluation stating he was fit to parent. Gregory suspected the documents were forged, but proving it would take time we didn't have. The judge seemed swayed by my father's resources versus our obvious financial struggles. During a recess, my brother grabbed my hand. What if we lose? He whispered. We won't, I said. But doubt crept in as my father's lawyer painted me as a struggling actress who could barely support herself, let alone a teenager with special needs. Then Marcus walked into the courtroom. He'd been recording conversations with my mother for weeks, including one where she detailed exactly how they'd forged the custody documents and bribed witnesses. He played the recordings right there, my mother's voice filling the courtroom as she laughed about manipulating the system. The judge is an idiot, her recorded voice said. Just like everyone else. Wave some money around, shed some tears, and they'll believe anything. We'll get both kids back and make them pay for every penny they cost us. My father's face went white. His lawyer tried to object, but the damage was done. The judge ordered an immediate investigation into all submitted documents. Within hours, the fake bank statements unraveled, the character witnesses admitted to being paid, and the psychologist's license was found to have been revoked years ago. But my parents had one more card to play. That night, our apartment building's fire alarm went off at 2 a.m. As we evacuated, I noticed smoke coming specifically from our unit. The fire department found evidence of arson. Accelerant poured through our mail slot. We lost everything. My brother's art supplies, our clothes, the framed custody letter, all reduced to ash and smoke. The Red Cross put us up in a motel, the same one we'd stayed in that first night after I'd taken him from our parents. Maybe she was right, I said, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Maybe I can't do this. My brother sat up in the other bed. Remember what you told me? We survived. That's what matters. Ms. Chen, cleared of all false accusations, organized a fundraiser at school. Students and teachers contributed what they could. Gregory waived his remaining fees. Even Marcus showed up with an envelope of cash, refusing to say where it came from. The investigation into the fire led back to one of my mother's pharmaceutical contacts, a woman who'd been selling pills through her network. She flipped immediately when faced with federal charges, revealing the entire structure of my mother's operation from prison. The scope was staggering. My mother had been running a prescription substance ring from her cell, using a network of nurses, pharmacy techs, and sales reps she'd cultivated over years. The money from the lawsuit, the bribes, even the hire for the arson, it all traced back to substance money. My father tried to claim ignorance, but recorded calls showed him fully aware and participating. He'd been the one to arrange the arson, thinking destroying our home would force us back under their control. During the final custody hearing, the judge reviewed everything: the exploitation, the substance dealing, the forgery, the arson. My parents sat in shackles, no longer the polished suburban couple who'd treated us like investments. I've seen many cases of parental failure, the judge said, but rarely have I seen such calculated cruelty toward one's own children. She granted me permanent custody and issued restraining orders against both parents. She also ordered them to pay restitution for the destroyed apartment and legal fees, though Gregory warned we'd likely never see a penny. Walking out of that courthouse, my brother and I stood in the afternoon sun. We had nothing but each other and a garbage bag of donated clothes, but for the first time in our lives, we were free. So what now? My brother asked. Now we build something real, I said. We found a new apartment, smaller but safer. I kept working multiple jobs while my brother finished high school. Some nights were hard when bills piled up or nightmares woke us, but we had something our parents never gave us: genuine care for each other's well-being. My brother started selling his artwork at local markets, contributing what he could without jeopardizing his recovery. I landed a steady position at a theater company, finally able to work in my field. Slowly, painfully, we built the life our parents had tried to destroy. Mrs. Chen visited weekly, bringing dinner and helping my brother with college applications. Gregory checked in regularly, making sure no new legal threats emerged. Even Marcus occasionally texted, letting us know if he heard anything through his old networks. The day my brother got accepted to art school with a full scholarship, we sat in our tiny kitchen confusion and cried. Not from sadness or fear, but from relief. We'd made it through. You know what's funny? My brother said, wiping his eyes. They spent so much time trying to make us into investments, they never realized we were already valuable. I thought about all those productivity reports, the Ring cameras, the calculated cruelty of parents who saw children as profit margins. They'd tried to break us into sellable pieces, never understanding that our worth came from something they couldn't quantify or control. We're going to be okay, I said, and for the first time, I truly believed it. My parents had taught us we were investments, but we'd learned the truth. We were survivors, we were family, and that was worth more than any return they could have calculated. The scholarship letter arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was rushing to my third job. My brother held it up with shaking hands, and we both knew this changed everything. Art school with full funding meant he could finally escape the shadow of what our parents had done to us. But that same afternoon, Gregory called with news that made my blood run cold. My mother had been transferred to minimum security and was eligible for work release. The pharmaceutical company that had unknowingly employed her during her crime spree wanted to distance themselves from the scandal by offering her a position in their legal department, claiming rehabilitation. She'll have daytime freedom, Gregory explained. Technically, she can't contact you, but we both know restraining orders are just paper. My brother's hands trembled as he packed for art school orientation. I found him sitting on his bed at midnight, surrounded by half-filled boxes, staring at his acceptance letter like it might disappear. What if she shows up there? He asked. What if she finds a way to ruin this too? I sat beside him, remembering all the times our parents had sabotaged our achievements. The writing contest money they stole, the theater costumes destroyed, every moment of joy turned into currency for their control. We won't let her, I said, though I wasn't sure how to keep that promise. The next morning, I dropped him off at freshman orientation. Other parents were taking photos and wiping away proud tears. We stood awkwardly by my hit-up Honda, both scanning the crowd for familiar faces that shouldn't be there. I'll be fine, he said, grabbing his secondhand art supplies. You've got enough to worry about. But I couldn't stop worrying. Every time my phone rang at work, I expected news that she'd found him. When a number I didn't recognize called 3 times in a row, I finally answered with my heart pounding. This is Joyce from the University Financial Aid Office, the voice said. We've received a formal challenge to your brother's scholarship eligibility. The room tilted. I gripped the coffee shop counter as Joyce explained that someone had submitted documents claiming my brother had lied on his application about his criminal record and substance dealing history. The documents appear quite thorough, Joyce continued. We'll need to conduct a full investigation. I left work immediately, my manager finally making good on his threat to fire me, but I didn't care. My brother needed me. During the drive to the university, Gregory called back. The challenge came from a concerned citizen, but the paperwork has your mother's fingerprints all over it, he said. She's using her work release job to access legal databases and build cases against you both. I found my brother in his dorm room, surrounded by roommates he'd just met, trying to act normal while his world collapsed. Again. We walked to the quad where other freshmen were playing frisbee and laughing, living the college experience he'd fought so hard to reach. Maybe I should just leave, he said quietly, before they make me. The word came out harder than I intended. We're done running, done letting them take things from us. Gregory met us at the financial aid office with boxes of documentation, every therapy session proving my brother's recovery, every teacher recommendation, every piece of evidence showing how he'd rebuilt his life after what our parents did to him. Joyce reviewed everything with the scholarship committee while we waited in the hallway. My brother sat with his head in his hands, and I fought the urge to storm back to that minimum security facility and confront my mother myself. She's not going to stop, he said. Even from prison, she'll keep finding ways to hurt us. He was right. The committee cleared him, maintaining his scholarship, but the damage was done. My brother couldn't focus on classes, constantly looking over his shoulder. His roommates started avoiding him after rumors spread about his past. The fresh start he'd earned was already tainted. Then Ms. Chen called with an idea that seemed insane. What if we got ahead of her, controlled the narrative instead of reacting to it? She connected us with a documentary filmmaker named Catherine, who specialized in stories about family trauma and recovery. At first, I refused. We'd been through enough exposure, but my brother surprised me. Maybe if people know the truth, Mom can't twist it anymore, he said. We spent weekends filming, telling our story from the beginning. The Ring cameras in our bedrooms, the forced substance dealing, the way they'd called us investments instead of children. Catherine was gentle but thorough, drawing out details we'd never told anyone. The hardest part was filming at the ruins of our parents' McMansion, now fully foreclosed and empty. My brother stood in his old bedroom, pointing to where the camera had been, explaining how he'd had to perform productivity for parents who saw him as a profit margin. I used to lie here planning how to make more money for them, he said to the camera, not because I wanted to, but because if I didn't, they'd find ways to make me wish I had. Word got out about the documentary. My mother, using her work release freedom, hired a lawyer to send cease and desist letters. She claimed defamation, invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, but Catherine had good lawyers too. Everything we said was documented truth, every claim backed by evidence. The Ring camera footage our parents had installed to control us became exhibits of their abuse. My father, still in maximum security, somehow got word to his old business contacts. Suddenly, I was getting calls about job opportunities that seemed too good to be true. Management positions at companies I'd never applied to, salaries that would solve all our financial problems. It's a trap, Gregory warned. Take any of those jobs and they'll find a way to use it against you. Claim you're profiting from defaming them. So I kept working my remaining 2 jobs, exhausted but free. My brother threw himself into his art, creating a series about surveillance and control that his professors called groundbreaking. He was healing through creation, turning trauma into something beautiful. The documentary premiered at a small film festival. We sat in the back row, holding hands as strangers watched our story unfold. When the lights came out, the audience was silent. Then someone started clapping, and soon the entire theater was on their feet. A woman approached us afterward, tears in her eyes. My parents did something similar. Thank you for showing me I'm not alone. More people came forward with their own stories. Parents who'd stolen their identities for credit fraud. Children forced to work instead of study. Families where love was conditional on profit. We'd accidentally opened a door to conversations people had been afraid to have. My mother escalated. She used her legal access to file lawsuits not just against us, but against Ms. Chen, Gregory, even Catherine. She claimed conspiracy, harassment, elder abuse. The cases were baseless but expensive to fight. She's trying to bankrupt everyone who helped you, Gregory explained. Make the cost of supporting you too high. Ms. Chen's school put her on administrative leave leave during the legal proceedings. Gregory had to take out loans to keep his practice running while fighting the suits. Catherine's production company considered pulling the documentary. My brother called me one night sobbing. "This is my fault. Everyone's suffering because of us." "No," I said firmly. "They're suffering because our parents are predators who can't stand losing control." But he started pulling away, missing classes, not answering texts. I drove to his dorm to find him packing, ready to drop out and disappear so everyone else could have peace. I sat on his bed, surrounded by half-packed boxes, just like that night before orientation. "You know what the difference is between us and them?" He shook his head. "We actually care about the people in our lives, and that's why we're going to win." The next day, something unexpected happened. The pharmaceutical company fired my mother. Turns out, using company resources to file personal lawsuits violated her work release agreement. She was sent back to maximum security, her minimum security privileges revoked. Gregory called with barely contained excitement. Without access to legal databases, she can't maintain the lawsuits. They're falling apart. One by one, the cases were dismissed. Ms. Chen returned to teaching. Gregory's practice recovered. Catherine's documentary gained wider distribution, eventually airing on a major streaming platform. My brother returned to his art with new purpose. His surveillance series won the Freshman Showcase. He started mentoring other students who'd escaped abusive families, turning our shared trauma into something that could help others. I was restocking shelves at my night job when my phone buzzed with a text from him. Just a photo of his latest painting. Two figures standing in sunlight, finally free from the cameras that had watched their every move. The next morning, I got a call from the theater company where I'd been working. They'd seen the documentary and were inspired by our story. They offered me a full-time position as assistant director with benefits and stable hours. "We want someone who understands fighting for their art," the director said. I accepted immediately, finally able to quit my other jobs. That night, my brother and I had dinner at a real restaurant for the first time in years. No gas station coffee or vending machine meals, just two survivors eating pasta and planning futures our parents had tried to steal. "You know what's weird?" my brother said. "I keep waiting for something bad to happen, like this is too good to last." I understood. We'd been in survival mode so long, peace felt like a threat. Every good thing seemed like a setup for disappointment. But slowly, meal by meal, day by day, we were learning to trust joy again. Catherine's documentary won several awards, with proceeds going to a fund for young adults escaping abusive families. My brother and I became reluctant advocates, speaking at screenings and conferences. Every time we told our story, someone would approach us afterward with their own. Gregory helped us navigate the speaking engagements, making sure we weren't exploited by people who wanted to profit from our pain. Ms. Chen came to every local event, proud of how far we'd come. Even Marcus showed up to a screening, clean for 2 years and working as a counselor. "Your brother saved my life," he told the audience. "Even when he was drowning, he threw me a lifeline." My parents tried one last manipulation. They filed for early release based on accepting responsibility for their actions. They'd found a prison ministry willing to advocate for them, painting them as reformed sinners who'd seen the light. The parole hearing required victim impact statements. My brother and I sat in Gregory's office, trying to find words for what they'd done to us. "How do you explain parents who saw you as investments? Who charged rent from children? Who turned their own son into a substance dealer?" "Just tell the truth," Gregory advised. "Let their actions speak for themselves." At the hearing, we sat across from our parents for the first time since the trial. My mother had aged badly, her pharma sales polish replaced by gray roots and prison pallor. My father looked smaller, his controlling rage deflated into sullen silence. They'd prepared statements about redemption and regret. My mother cried on cue, talking about missing her children and wanting to make amends. My father spoke about finding faith and understanding his failures. Then the parole board played clips from the documentary. My brother at 15, shaking from Adderall withdrawal. Me working 3 jobs while maintaining a 4.2 GPA. The ring cameras, the forced substance dealing, the theft and destruction. "These aren't mistakes," the board chair said. "This is systematic abuse spanning years." Parole denied. They'd served their full sentences. Walking out of that building, my brother stopped on the steps. I thought I'd feel different, victorious or something, but I just feel empty. "That's okay," I said. "We don't need them to fill us anymore." We drove home to our small apartment, walls covered with his art and my show posters. Ms. Chen was waiting with takeout to celebrate, not the parole denial, but our survival. That night, I found my brother in the kitchen, sketching. He'd drawn our family, not the 4 people who'd shared that McMansion, but the real family we'd built. Ms. Chen grading papers at our table, Gregory fighting for us in court, Catherine behind her camera, Marcus getting clean, all the people who'd shown us what family really meant. "We did it," he said quietly. "We actually made it through." I thought about our parents in their cells, still calculating our worth in dollars and disappointments. They'd never understand what we'd learned. That value isn't about profit margins or return on investment. It's about showing up, fighting for each other, building something real from the ashes of what tried to destroy you. My brother pinned the sketch to our fridge next to his acceptance letter and my promotion announcement. Evidence of lives rebuilt. Proof that investments can't love you back, but people can. We were free, not just from them, but from their definition of worth. And that freedom was worth more than any inheritance they could have left us.